Dr. Schwartz is a professor emeritus of mathematics at the College of Staten Island, president emeritus of the Jewish Vegetarians of North America, and co-founder and coordinator of the Society of Ethical and Religious Vegetarians. He's best known as a Jewish vegetarian activist and advocate for animal rights in the United States and Israel. As an Orthodox Jew, Dr. Schwartz began to explore what Judaism had to say about diet, ecology, and the proper treatment of animals. The result was his best-known book, Judaism and Vegetarianism. It was first published in 1982, with later expanded editions published in 88 and 2001. It explores vegetarianism from the standpoint of biblical, Talmudic, and rabbinical references, and concludes that vegetarianism is the highest form of kosher and the best diet for Jews in the modern world.
Thank you, Richard. And I know you. We've done some interviews, and I know that you, when you talk about vegetarianism, you're talking about pure vegetarianism, which is veganism. Is that correct?
Correct.
As your shirt says.
Welcome. And Richard, if you can just turn up your volume just a little wee bit, can you check?
Okay.
Just a little
bit.
I'm
going to try. Let's see. Have this. Okay, I'm sorry. So I thought I had set this to the beginning. Oops, I'm heading the wrong direction. I want to get back to the beginning of this. Sorry. I thought I had really said it. Okay, yeah, I'll try to speak a little bit about it. Thank you for the kind introduction. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to be talking about how a climate catastrophe can be prevented. Probably the most important issue today, because the world is so threatened by it. And let's see, oh boy, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. Okay, I want to tell a little bit about myself. I'm president emeritus of Jewish Veg and professor emeritus at the College of Staten Island. And one of the ways I got involved in this is teaching math at the College of Staten Island. Some students were not so well motivated, so I created a course called Mathematics and the Environment, wrote this textbook here called Mathematics and Global Survival, and we tried to relate mathematics to things happening in the world. One year was about world hunger, and I was learning about people starving, unfortunately, and feeling not enough food, perhaps. But then I read this wonderful book by Frances Moore Pay called Diet for a Small Planet, and she pointed out how wasteful animal-based diets are. That, for example, 70% of the grain produced in the U.S. at that time and even today being fed to animals to fatten them up for slaughter, while at that time an estimated 20 million people were dying of hunger and its effects. And, whoops, let me go the other way. Okay, so we became a vegetarian in about 1978, vegan in 2000. You can see we're going to go into many of these issues that really point to veganism as the ideal diet. And I wrote a number of books, and thanks in the introduction, mentioning some of them, but this one sort of related to the issues. You can see it's global survival, relating Judaism, but of course, other religions have the same values of compassion and justice and sharing, so they're all relevant. And the most recent book is Vegan Revolution, and again, saving our world and revitalizing Judaism. And I feel Judaism and other religions really have to be revitalized because the case for vegetarianism and veganism is so strong, and yet so few are either vegetarians or vegans. And the fact that also climate change is such a tremendous threat, and very few people are involved with that. I'm going to be talking about later. I'm not trying to sell this book. I'm trying to give it away, get it to as many people as possible. And I'll give an email address myself later. And anybody that emails them, I'm happy to send a PDF of this book and my new edition of the book I mentioned before, Judaism and Global Survival, and a whole bunch of valuable material. Okay, so I want to get into this. How can we avert a climate catastrophe? First, we have to realize how serious the climate threat is. And of course, it's not just me. 97% is probably the greatest consensus. Climate scientists agree. All the major science academies that have worldwide have taken a position, most have. And most important, I can have an opinion, you can have an opinion, but peer-reviewed articles, meaning that other experts have okayed them, doesn't mean every single one is going to prove to be correct. But when you have thousands, and these are in respected scientific journals, and to give you an example, based on many studies, the UN Secretary, should be Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he's called the climate threat code red for humanity. That delay means death. And we're going to see why that is. We don't have much time to make a difference. And the major group on this IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the reason I say that is the most significant group is intergovernmental. That means climate experts from many countries, it's not just a few here or there, experts. And they said in 2018 that we may have only until 2030 to make very significant changes in order to have a chance to avert a climate catastrophe. But unfortunately, they said that carbon dioxide emissions are continuing to increase. You can see 2 or 3 parts per million per year, so that we're sort of heading in the wrong direction. And that's why this is the most urgent issue, and we have to make these unprecedented changes. And again, big factor, the temperature has been going up. This horizontal line represents the average temperature for the previous century, the 20th century. And see blue below average to about mid-century. You can see it's been heating up. And it turns out the last 8 years are the hottest years in recorded history since about 2018, when temperature records were able to be kept widely throughout the world. So it's heating up. We give itself more and more heat waves. And an example of that, we're going to more on that later. The last 4 months, June, July, August, September 2023, all broke temperature records, the hottest June, the hottest July, etc. And here's some more examples of that. Every decade since the 1970s has been hotter than the previous decade. And what I just mentioned, the last 4 months, all broke records. And all of the 23 years in this century on the top 24 hottest, again, since about 1880. Many records broken. Just to give one example, London reached 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, first time in 2022. Okay, but as they say, we ain't seen nothing yet. We are now at about 1.2 degrees Celsius, and here in 2023. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the experts hope we won't pass 1.5, but you can see that could happen in the next decade or so. And 2 degrees, going to pass that. By the way, this here, most conservative, it means that at the end of the year, we're going to hit at least 3 degrees, at the end of the century, 3 degrees. But this is based on the pledges made in 2015 at the Paris Climate Conference. And unfortunately, most countries are way behind it. So anyway, you can see that if we're going to see many climate events, floods and storms, etc., so far at 1.2, imagine what it could be like if we hit 4, 5, or 6 degrees Celsius. So this is the most urgent issue facing the world, and everything possible has to be done to prevent a climate catastrophe. Okay, so things are happening already. Glaciers are melting all over the world very, very rapidly, far faster than climate experts projected. Greenland's melting, and that is such a big, big area. That could be many, many feet if that melts. And in my screen, some is blocked out. We can see the comparison. Greenland's melting. Polar bears are threatened, as many other animals are. As they say, we're in the 6th extinction, with animals disappearing very rapidly. And just one other example of that. Okay, so the seas are rising all over, and there's already what they call sunny day flooding in coastal cities like Miami Beach, Florida, because the tides have become much higher. Only 8 inches so far, but expected to be much, much higher in the future. So this is a big danger to coastal cities and much of the world, especially like a country like Bangladesh, close to the coastlines. Okay, I'm happen to be in Israel right now, and large parts could be lost by 2050, and it's true of many areas. And the whole Middle East area where I am is heating up almost twice as fast as the rest of the world. So here's something very serious: permafrost melting, and that's in the frozen north. From permanent, so it's not supposed to melt at all, but it's warming up so much it is melting. And why that's significant, underneath here is methane and other very powerful greenhouse gases. So that is a major, major threat. Okay, of course, the droughts are increasing. Many lakes are drying up, rivers drying up. Very, very serious problem affecting agriculture, etc. So this is a multi-faceted threat. Wildfires, of course, are increasing, and I understand in Canada there were 270 wildfires one point this summer, and it affects areas far from that. I'm sure most of you have heard. Cities like New York had conditions where people had trouble breathing, told to stay inside, for example. And we'll see more about this later, but this is a triple threat for the future. Of course, this tree that's going to be disappearing was sequestering carbon dioxide. So that's a sink that's being lost. All the carbon that was previously stored in this tree is going to be going up to the atmosphere. And you can see a building back here. Here's a window, for example, and many buildings destroyed. So it'll take a lot more energy to rebuild these houses, and many cars being destroyed. So you can see that this is a major factor. Okay, and storms are increasing in severity. People will say, well, didn't we always have storms? Didn't we always have wildfires? And of course, certainly true, but things that were called like 100-year storms, expected to happen on average once every 100 years, are now happening every few years, sometimes every year, and sometimes there's even two major events in 1 year. So 3 reasons, or we've always had them, are much more severe. The seas are higher, as we mentioned before. Of course, they're heating up and the melting of the glaciers and the polar ice caps. That increases the storm surges. Sorry for the typo here. And the water has become hotter, giving more energy to storms. And I wrote this down because just a couple of days ago, Hurricane Otis hit Mexico, and that was just a tropical storm, serious, but not too bad. It became very quickly, amazing, some of the experts, to a category 5 hurricane, tropical storm to category 5 hurricane in a very short time. So this is what is happening. And of course, the atmosphere is warmer, the world's been heating up, more moisture. That means when there is rain or snow, that it could be far more severe. Okay, of course, the floods are increasing. We've heard about floods in Greece, many areas. Seems almost every day in the news, there's something, it's either a flood or wildfire, storm. Things are happening. And okay, so sorry that been a bit pessimistic, although we're going to have hopefully some signs of optimism later. But there are 4 reasons why things are likely to get far, far worse. Rather than mentioning them here, I have pictures to illustrate them, so we'll go on to them. This is that temperature picture we showed before. So again, why are the projections for the future very serious? Where again, 1.2, and you saw all the pictures of the floods, wildfires, storms, droughts at 1.2. So imagine if it's 3, 4, 5, or 6 is indicated over here. So it's another very serious thing. This is probably the most important graph to understand why climate change is so serious. This is atmospheric carbon dioxide. If we went back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, 285 parts per million atmospheric carbon dioxide, and it's been going up and up, and it's reached about 420. well above the 350 parts per million right over here that climate experts think is a threshold value for sustainability. So we're way above it. The world is like a heart patient with a very high cholesterol, and it's unfortunately increasing because we indicated before, atmospheric carbon dioxide is going up by about 2 or 3 parts per million. So there's two possibilities. If it keeps going up, disaster. Somehow we have to bring it down, hopefully below that 350 I mentioned. Okay, another serious effect for the future is climate refugees. Because of all the storms, floods, wildfires, droughts, tens of millions of desperate refugees will be fleeing the effects, and that makes instability, terrorism more and more likely. This has been found in many cases. Matter of fact, recently there's been civil wars in Sudan and Syria because severe droughts, 5-6 years, the farms failed. Farmers moved into the really overcrowded cities, and that made instability, always people willing to take advantage of the situation, and civil wars resulted. Okay, and I sort of mentioned this before, that why the climate events now make the future ones more serious. Again, the wildfires destroy trees, so they no longer sequester or absorb carbon dioxide. The burned trees emit the stored carbon dioxide, and much energy will be required to heat up the homes and to produce new cars because they've been destroyed. Okay, there's another thing that's called self-reinforcing positive feedback loops, or for short, vicious cycles. If you have the frozen north here, the sun's rays hit it, but it's a very good reflector. 90% is reflected back out into space, but once some of it melts, then this is much darker, absorbed most of it, 94%, only 6% reflected back into space. But I have some water here. Well, okay, so, and again, Middle East extreme weather expected to hit because of the above factors. Okay, so what about solutions? Well, solar energy is part of it. This is what the experts talk about. And luckily, the prices have decreased sharply with more use and more experimentation. And wind power prices gone down there sharply. But what is being forgotten is the elephant in the room, a factor that's being overlooked, and more relevantly, the cow in the room. And I say that because there's a book by Glenn Mercer called Food is Climate, pointing out that animal-based agriculture is really the number one cause of climate change. And we're showing that over here. Over 40% of the world's ice-free land being used for grazing and growing feed crops for animals. Over 40%, really about 43%. And because of that, the number of trees, imagine if this was all forested, absorbing the carbon dioxide. So it's just the opposite. You have cows here, and by the way, they're belching out methane, and methane is a greenhouse gas over 80 times as potent as carbon dioxide. During the 10 to 15 years, the methane's in the air in heating up the atmosphere. So that is why the methane and the destruction of the trees, why animal-based agriculture is the number one cause. And here it is, trees being cut down. And this is just something I saw just before, just today, so I added it. 100 million acres of trees lost annually. This tree, notice the size of it, absorbing carbon dioxide, giving us the oxygen, of course, we all need to live and survive, and being cut down fast, and forests being burned, again, grazing for the animals, growing feed crops for the animals. Okay, and of course, it's the older trees, the bigger trees being destroyed, and that is a serious, serious problem. And here's another picture showing it for the animals. Looks like about 3/4 of the land is of the agricultural land. Again, I mentioned 43%. That was of all the land. Of the agricultural land, looks like about 75%. And for carrots, cauliflower, other vegetables and fruits,
Hello?
only about a quarter. Okay. And imagine if this was reforested, if not all of it, a good part of it, rewilded with plants and all, that would have trees absorbing, sequestering carbon dioxide, hopefully bringing it down to a much safer level, hopefully below 350 parts per million, that threshold. And even having it, this would help the soil, and the soil would also be absorbing more carbon dioxide. However, again, just the opposite happening. Just to give one example, the Amazon, we mentioned before, was 187 million acres destroyed every year, not only for agriculture, but agriculture is the main source of that. Okay. Sarah Schwartz wrote a paper that argues at least 87% of greenhouse gas emissions due to animal agriculture. He takes into account not just what's emitted, but the lost opportunity, course, that we have by not replanting or reforesting. In other words, if with less agriculture, first of all, there'd also be less carbon dioxide because of all the machinery needed to with growing the plants, to irrigate the plants. So this is the opportunity cost of being lost by not reforesting. He promised this granddaughter of his that he would help create a vegan world by 2026, and making very progress. He's really a hero, doing quite a bit. And I think he's the one really behind my being here and all the other speakers during this 2-day event. Okay, so we've got to get the world out, climate change. We need system changes here and many demonstrations. And here's the point. What kind of world are we leaving for future generations? The number one factor, the number one issue for today. And I've been blessed with 6 great-grandchildren since moving to Israel in 2016, and here are 5 of them, and 2 more have been born since this picture was taken, 1 more on the way. So I have a personal stake. What kind of world are we leaving? If things are so bad now with every summer with floods and droughts and glaciers melting and the seas rising, we've got to make a difference, and that's one of the purposes here. So it's really the choice between a mainly vegan world and a destroyed world. So to take off on give peace a chance, give peace a chance. As a matter of fact, I've been arguing that the slogan of the vegetarian or vegan movements and the peace movement should be the same. All we're saying is give peace a chance. More about that later. So there it is. We got one planet here, no planet B, and there's no other effective plan B than one I indicated. Of course, we have to also continue with solar energy, wind power, and make more efficient transportation, recycle, get better right for many things. But this is essential in agriculture. Now, since how much time I have, I'll try to leave some time for questions. Since it's urgent to be a shift to veganism, I'm going to go quickly, relatively go through why there should be a shift to veganism, and the main reasons: preserving our health, treating animals with compassion, protecting the environment, conserve natural resources, reducing hunger, pursuing peace and justice, actually. And I've been promoting it through Judaism, but other religions as well. So I have some on that. We'll try to do this quickly. Well, here's the thing. I had a cover story in the Jerusalem Report, should Jews be vegans? And I gave many arguments, and no rabbi or anybody else was able to refute the arguments in this article, ones I'm about to make now. And Jewish teachings on health, most important mitzvah commandment. But again, we have to guard our health, and do everything possible to save a life. And the health benefits, plant-based, whole food, plant-based diet, weight loss, reduce heart disease risk, reduce the chance of getting certain types of cancer, manage diabetes, and even reverse it, as we shall see. Okay. Well, bottom line, more meat and diet, more disease. I couldn't get a better graph, so try to explain this one. More meat, more heart disease, more bowel cancer. Far, far less meat, far less heart disease, far less cancer. And in between, same thing. So there's the bottom line that many medical studies have shown this. And here's Dr. Dean Ornish. He shows you can reverse heart disease on a full whole food plant-based diet. And type 2 diabetes can be reversed. Many studies, and unfortunately, many doctors don't point that out. T. Cohen Campbell, one of the directors of what's called a China study, the New York Times called the Grand Prix of Epidemiology, the greatest epidemiological study that showed that even small amounts of animal protein in a diet could make a difference. This could only be done in China because most people in the world move around from country to country, city to city. But in China, they tend to stay in their village from generation to generation, and each area has standard diet. So they're able to do that study and show many health benefits of plant-based diet. And there's many studies. Here's a wartime study, World War II in Norway. Notice the war years, 1940, 1945, etc. Of course, of the war conditions, the meat consumption went down sharply, and even though it was a time of great stress, where you think disease might go up, the disease rate went down only to increase again toward the end of the war, at the end of the war when they went back to the animal-based diet. And heart disease goes up as the cholesterol in the diet increases. A couple other graphs here. And because of that, I asked the question, which vegan foods have cholesterol? And the answer is none of them. Grain, 0, vegetables, 0, nuts and seeds and fruits and legumes, all 0. However, eggs and other animal products, high amounts of cholesterol. Of course. Okay, so, and very briefly, we are really close to the herbivorous animals. Notice our teeth, perfect grinding food. What a difference from a carnivorous or omnivorous animal. And of course, a hand's perfect for picking an orange or an apple. And far, far from the claws of a carnivorous or even omnivorous animal. And our intestinal system is much longer. There's a vegetarian vegan animal compared to a carnivorous animal. And this is very good, very long, winding, very good to absorb all the minerals, vitamins, other nutrients from fruits. But here's short, so the meat is not in the system of a carnivorous animal that long. Okay. And again, because it's so unnatural diet, it's affected people. For example, the age of puberty in girls the world over has become lower. And for example, the age of puberty, the first period for girls, Norway, it was over 17 in about 1640, 120 years later, way down close to 13. And again, other countries as well. And that's continued and continued. So, and that is a risk factor for breast cancer, for example. So girls at the age of 12 or 13 can theoretically have a baby when they're certainly not emotionally fit for that. Okay, however, there's a wonderful book just published by a Hopo Hannock called the Humane Hoax. And the animal industry tries to convince us in many ways that products are healthy, animals not mistreated, but there's a protein myth that you can only get protein from animal food, but you can certainly get it from nuts and seeds and other foods, but fruits and vegetables. Everyone has protein. So if you could, well-balanced meal should be okay on that. And here's the thing in terms of that, a human baby, mother's milk, the healthiest for an infant, only 5 or 6, notice percent of its calories and protein. A rat's mother's milk, almost 50%. And a human baby doubles his or her birth rate in 180 days. So if we ever needed protein, time of super rapid growth, doubling birth rate in 180 days, about 6 months, and yet only 5 or 6%. So it's really a myth. And there's also a calcium myth that we need plenty of milk for a healthy diet to avoid osteoporosis, for example. But it turns out the countries like the US, Israel, Scandinavian countries, where they get the most protein, most calcium, have the highest rates of osteoporosis. And here's a question. Animal protein is actually a major cause of osteoporosis because the human body can absorb carbohydrates and fat, but not protein. But the animal protein acidifies the blood. It needs calcium to buffer and neutralize that. And if there's not enough in the bones, it'll be taken from the blood and excreted along with the excess protein. So you can have a negative calcium balance even if you're getting plenty of dairy products. Okay, and again, this sort of shows the same thing. High protein, much urine, calcium is excreted in the urine, medium protein, less amount. And if you're low protein diet, less urine, less calcium in the urine. So that is a major, major factor. And here's a misleading thing, healthy eating plate. Well, they've got fruits, wonderful, vegetables, great, whole grains, marvelous. They call it healthy protein, ignoring that all these foods have protein, and it's not really healthy. All the animal products, as we've seen, have negative health effects. Okay, now in addition, another big thing, thank God we seem to be over the coronavirus, but many pandemics have been caused by animal-based diets, the widespread production and consumption of animal products. Here are just a few examples: bird flu, swine flu, MERS, SARS, Ebola, and most likely the coronavirus, although there's some dispute about that. And there it is. Bird flu is really happening now, and millions of birds have been killed in order to try to prevent its spread. Another health factor is antibiotics. More than half the antibiotics are in the animal feed to try to prevent disease in the very unnatural conditions, and also to increase their growth. They don't know why, but it turns out to be something that's positive on the growth. And I'm going to try to leave maybe 15 minutes for questions, so I'm going to move fairly fast through remaining slides. Okay, compassion for animals. Like other religions, Jews are supposed to be compassionate children of compassionate ancestors, and imitating a God, as indicates in Psalms 145:9, God was compassionate over all of God's works. Book of Proverbs says the righteous individual considers the lives of his or her animals, and many teachings in the Bible. You can't muzzle an ox while threshing the field. You can't yoke a strong and a weak animal. And it's a teaching that Jews, we have to feed animals before sitting down for our own meals. And Shabbat, part of the Ten Commandments even, not only are Jews to rest on the Sabbath day, but animals as well. So they should be free to roam the field. But the conditions for animals are very, very far from that. Kept in very close cages here. They can't even raise one wing. Very frustrating. They don't have the natural pecking system. So they tend to peck at each other, harm each other, perhaps even kill other birds. So the industry, instead of increasing the space, so they have increased it a bit due to a lot of pressure on them, they actually debeak the birds, a very cruel thing. No painkiller, no anesthesia. They cut off, this is equivalent to cutting off our hands in effect. So very, and sometimes it's so severe that the animals are not able to feed and die, but since they have millions and millions of birds, they're willing to do this in order, again, because profit is their major consideration, not the welfare of the bird. And the male chicks don't even make it that far because they can't, male chicks can't lay eggs. They have not been genetically programmed to have much flesh as other kinds of chickens have been, so-called broilers. So they are killed immediately, sometimes put in a plastic bags to suffocate or die from the weight of birds above, or maybe it's here to be ground up for pet food. So again, the teachings, religious teachings, or just humane teachings are violated by how animals are treated. Dairy cows, again, females don't fare too well either. They are artificially inseminated, impregnated every single year, so they'll be able to constantly be able to give milk. And the next picture is not too nice, but this is an example of artificial insemination, again, on rape racks. So they have babies every year, they're able to give milk. And very tragically, the babies are taken away almost immediately because they want that milk to be sold commercially to make a profit and not to be given to the baby calves who milk was really designed for. Okay, of course, this says we love our families, so do animals, but the reality is factory farms are treated as commodities, fattened up as quickly as possible, killed far, far, far before their natural lifespan. And because of this, last summer I had a book published called Restoring and Transferring the Ancient Jewish New Year for Animals, Ideal Time Has Come. And that was a New Year many years ago, was really initially the days of the temple, thousands of years ago, for tithing of animals for sacrifices. So my idea is to transform it into a day devoted to increasing awareness, Jewish teachings, religious teachings on compassion for animals, and how far the realities for animals are from these teachings. And this is just another picture. The other one was spread out and expanded. And because of that, I've had many events. Here was a Zoom webinar, August 2022. Again, how to transform the ancient Jewish New Year for animals, because it's important that people realize the religious teachings and the realities. Okay, the environmental teachings, very quickly. Just chapter 2 of the Bible, human being put into the Garden of Eden to work the land, but also to guard it. And it says that humans were given dominion. This is interpreted as responsible stewardship. Just as somebody has a big garden, doesn't have the time or the ability to take care of it, hires a gardener, gives that gardener dominion, but of course, to improve things as much as possible, not destroy. But negative, just as there's negative health effects, negative effects for animals, negative effects for the environment of animal-based diet. We mentioned deforestation before. The soil is being eroded and depleted, major cause of animal agriculture. Water is polluted by the waste products. And mentioned the polar bears as loss of biodiversity. And of course, climate change, and that we have discussed before. And there's another teaching about conservation of resources. According to the Bible in Deuteronomy, chapter 20, you're not to destroy fruit-bearing trees even in wartime. The Jewish states has extended that into a general prohibition, but animal-based diets are very wasteful of resources. Water, for example, can take up to 13 times as much water on an animal-based diet for a person on a plant-based diet, mainly because they're irrigating the feed crops, 70% of the corn and oats and soy being fed to animals. And really what makes this even more shameful is that we take healthy products like that corn oil and soy, we feed it to animals. And I say it's healthy because these products are devoid of saturated fat and cholesterol, but they're high in healthy complex carbohydrates and fiber, and feed them to the animals, and they become very unhealthy, as we indicated before. And again, teachings on hunger. Prophet Isaiah, with a share of bread with a hunger, leave the corners, leave the field. But we mentioned before, 70% being fed to animals, and therefore it's a scale of world hunger, which could be eliminated if the food was fed more to people. So a vegan world could help reduce hunger, decrease food waste. And again, this is indicating 3.5 billion people more every year could be fed. That would really end hunger in the world. And last, of the 6 mandates that point to veganism as the ideal diet, the Psalms to seek peace and pursue it, and the prophetic dream that nations will build their swords and plowshares, spears into pruning hooks. But once again, we want to give peace a chance. That could reduce violence. And the Jewish sages saw that the Hebrew word lechem, which is for bread, and milchama for world, here, they come from the same root, and they deduce from that when there's a shortage of grain and other resources, people are more likely to go to war. Okay. Again, I can come back to some of these. This is a summary. We mentioned health, animals, environment, serving resources, hunger for peace, all violated by animal-based diets. Again, we have that choice in the mainly vegan world, a destroyed world. And this is a sign outside my apartment here in my retirement village at my age of 89 in Israel. If you love animals, stop eating them. And here is something very important, that it's much easier to be a vegan today. We've taken away the last argument that they just love the taste so much because they can get the same taste from many plant-based substitutes. And vegan restaurants on the rise, and even the animal-based restaurants have nowadays many vegan choices. So anything carnivorous animals can eat, we can eat as a vegan substitute. You know, there's almond milk, there's soy milk, there's substitutes for eggs and all kinds of meat, and that's increasing quite a bit. And here I am trying to get to work out many years ago with the same vegan t-shirt I'm wearing now, and a tie with all kinds of fruits and vegetables, and usually a yarmulke that also has fruits on it. And okay, there was a story in the Jerusalem Report, this very environmental activist seeking to save our world, you know, trying to give an idea, again, wearing that tie and holding up other plant-based ties with a cap that also has a vegan message on it. Okay, so again, I want to leave some time for questions, and I'll be happy to add things if not. So here's the story. As I said, I want to get that message out as much as possible. I'm willing to send PDFs of my books to key articles and make contact. This should be gmail.com, of course, is easy. Remember, first name Richard. So it's veggierich@gmail.com, VEGGIE rich@gmail.com. If you'd like to get complimentary free PDFs of the text of my book, Vegan Revolution, Saving the World, and others since then, or if you'd like to work with me on this, please email me any comments, suggestions on this presentation. I'd be happy to hear about them. And again, suggestions always welcome. And I hope you will take this information, speak to your rabbis, priests, ministers, imams, and get the word out that if we want to get a decent world, a healthy world, an environmentally sustainable world for future generations, it's essential that there be a shift to vegan diets. Okay, so I'm going to stop the sharing and maybe, whoops, see if I can close this. Nope, there I am. So be happy to take any questions, any comments that people may have. Any comments? Any questions?
Hello,
Any,
Dr. Schwartz.
disagreements, especially be happy to respond to.
I'm going to add Tammy.
Thank you. Does anybody, if anybody has any questions, they can put up their hand or write them in the chat for this beautiful vegan activist that has been part of our lives for a long time. Thank you for all your books, Richard, and your teachings and your continual work well into your 80s. You're an inspiration.
Well, thank you, and having this group was really an inspiration. And what Sarah, as you know, Sarah Schwartz is amazing. That he's doing should only be a success because this is the number one issue that we have. I hope everybody was able to hear me okay, and please help spread this message. And okay.
Did you have a question, BJ?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much. I really appreciate your work. I wonder when you became vegan and how is it going now with your vegan colleagues? I mean, with your non-vegan colleagues or your, yeah, tell me how it's going. Thank you.
Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning, I became vegetarian in about 1978. After teaching I taught math and the environment and finding out many negative effects of animal-based diet. And I was sort of a semi-vegan for a while, but in 2000 I became a vegan. And I've been trying to get the message out. And the good news is that we have the momentum. Things are moving in our direction, especially among the young people. Many more are moving toward vegetarian vegan diets. Unfortunately, they're not fast enough, but it's happening. Many are in denial. They don't want to know. And like some good news, I'm President Emeritus Jewish Veg. They're going to come out with a statement, a vegan statement that was signed by over 200 rabbis. On the other hand, I have wrote an article arguing that eating meat and other animal products is not halakhically justified. And the Jerusalem Post said they'd publish it if I can find a rabbi who would write an article refuting it so that they feel they would have some balance. I couldn't get such a rabbi. Nobody can answer us. They can't deny that animal-based diets are bad for health. Certainly, they horrendously mistreat animals. And we're finding the environmental effect. Can't deny they're very wasteful of water. And it's really a scandal, as I said, with so many people malnourished, many millions dying of hunger, that so much grain is fed to animals. So there's been a movement in our direction, but there's been a lot of denial. You probably may have heard the expression, denial is not just a river in Egypt. So this is unfortunately part of the realities. Any other?
Thank you.
By the way,
Barbara, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Hi, thank you for that excellent talk, Richard.
Thank you.
My question was, what do you say to people from Shahita UK who promote the slaughter of animals based on Jewish teaching? I've been in a debate with them before and I found them quite formidable.
Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, as mentioned partly in my talk, God's first dietary regimen, it's chapter 1, right at the beginning of the first chapter of the Torah, the Jewish Bible. It indicates that God's first diet regimen was strictly vegan. Okay, talked about the fruits and the vegetables. Secondly, you can mention, remember those pictures I shown? Compare our teeth with that of a carnivorous animal. Compare our hands with that of we don't have a claws. Again, our intestinal system, many other things. By the way, our stomach acids as human beings is only about 1/20th as strong as that of carnivorous animals. So we have, and you can mention the climate change and the health issue. And see, the important thing is, later on, after the flood and the time of Noah, thousands of years ago, permission was given to eat meat, but it was a concession. So the important thing is there's a choice. Jews and everybody else has a choice in their diet. But I always argue, shouldn't that choice be made taking into account the highest of religious values? And the fact that God would not want us to be unhealthy. God doesn't want animals. It says God's compassion is over all his work. Righteous person lives the life of his or her animals. So we have all that. And in a world where water and energy is becoming short, we need so much more water, energy, land. That, the fact that millions of people are dying of hunger, and yet we're feeding so much grain to the animal. So there's so many arguments. And if anybody tells them that, if it's a minister and buddy, I'd be happy to have a very respectful dialogue, debate on Zoom with them. But usually people shy away from that because they can't really answer our arguments.
Thank you, Richard. And also, Dr. Gabriel Cousins is also very good debater, and maybe him and Richard could get on a Zoom and do a video. I could facilitate that for you, Barbara, and do a recorded video and send it to you to give them a little bit of information on the teaching, how there's actually no kosher death of animals. So
that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right. I wonder if there's anybody, any of the viewers who disagrees with the arguments that I've given, anybody who sees any flaws in them, because I'd be happy to try to respond to that so that maybe I can add things for future talks. Anybody who has any disagreements. By the way, I wrote an article called 18 Reasons That You Think They Should Not Be Vegans or Vegetarians and Why They're Wrong. So we try to answer that, because someone may say, gee, it's great, I'm going to become a vegan. And then the friend says, yeah, but what about this? What about that? And if they can't answer it, that may discourage them. That's why in my book, Judaism and Vegetarianism, I have a whole section, questions and answers, and I have that article. And I think we have truth, morality, and justice on our side. And the other side just tries to duck the issue and, come up with outrageous arguments that can easily be refuted.
Okay, we have another question. Thank you, Richard, for that and really explaining the importance. Nancy wants to know, she says, when I meet Jews in my activism, I urge them to go to jewveg.com. Would you say that's still a good site to recommend to people?
Oh, yeah, that's excellent. By the way, I think now I might be able to get there that way, jewishveg.org. I'm not sure if it used to be with a common, maybe still will get you there, but I think .org. And by the way, I have jewishveg.org and then a slash and then my last name, SCHWARTZ. I have 250 articles at that site, with every issue from hunger and peace and justice and animals and the environment. So, yeah, that's an excellent source. And by the way, within the last couple of months or so, they have updated and revised their website. So that is definitely a very, very good source.
And would you also recommend, Richard, our Sacred Duty, the film, as a good teaching tool?
Wait a minute. Sacred Duty.
Are you familiar with the film, Our Sacred Duty?
Wait a minute. Let me see if I have something right over here. Whoops. Are you referring to this? Sacred Duty, applying Jewish values? Oh, yeah. Well, I happen to be the assistant producer of that. It was my idea. I was at a what they call a summer fest. And there was a group there that showed a very nice video on Christianity. And I used to send out a newsletter. I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a Jewish video like that? And usually I send out ideas and get lost in space. Nobody, but a wonderful person named Lionel Friedberg responded. He's a multi-award winning producer. And he said, we got to do it. I met him in Israel. We were there 2 weeks, took all kinds of videos. So I think it's wonderful. And by the way, we gave out 40,000 complimentary copies of that video. And people can see that. It's on YouTube freely. If you go to a Sacred Duty and do a search on YouTube, it's about an hour, and it gives our case. So, of course, as the assistant producer, I am a big fan of that video, to say the least.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're out of time. Can people contact you directly, Richard, if they have any questions? Can you put your
absolutely.
email in the chat? That would be great.
Okay.
And
well, okay, with before, I'll put it in the chat. Let's see. But again, it's veggierich@gmail.com, VEGGIERICH. I'm looking for the chat. Oh, here it is.
I'll put it in there for you.
Yeah,
Great.
okay, you can put it in. So VEGGIE at gmail.com. Again, I'd be very happy to send it people, 2 books at least, and links to other books. And I encourage everybody who gets them to pass it on. I want to freely get it to as many people as possible, because if we don't solve the climate crisis, everything else becomes insignificant. So thanks to everybody for watching, and shalom from Israel. All the best.
Thank you for your sacred teachings, Richard, and shalom and namaste, vegan.